Good morning. This is Deepika here. This morning, may I present to you my thoughts on becoming mindfully joyful. So, let us first get some notions out of the way. Do joy and happiness have a similar vibration? Do they make us feel the same way on the inside? Are their effects similar and in the same time frames? Any person, place, or thing that gives us happiness too quickly can also disillusion us equally fast. And whatever causes us to recollect internal joy can have longer lasting significance. So, the implicit memory of joy filled moments go a long way in refueling us consistently and constantly. At a time when we are facing out of control challenges, way bigger than our daily ones, how are we to understand and make right choices to be joyful, or discover a hidden happiness quotient in our sorrow, or even juxtapose our grief with joy and allow the latter to flourish in spite of having enough reasons to stay morose and helpless? We are being tested and called upon to make such choices. And if we are to raise the vibration of humanity, and if we are to reach a higher dimension of living. So, when we are dealing with chronic stress, which is a condition that has lasted for over 3 months, whether emotional, mental, psychological, metabolic, our joy circuits in the nervous system are overtaken by our stress circuits. And when stress circuits are activated, we feel powerless and helpless. We are prone to consumption, feeding into depression, and consequently keeping our overall stress level elevated. Forget longer lasting joy. Everyday garden variety happiness eludes us in that case. The pandemic has all of us thirsting for the kind of happy times we have known and taken for granted. The long and short of it is we are being called to rewire our brains so we start noticing more opportunity and our ability to find lasting joy, such that the current neural pathways of desolation and disempowerment don't fossilize. Might I add here, a spiritual philosophy works very well to give us this kind of higher perspective. But without concurrently uncovering our psychological depths, spiritual bypassing leaves us incomplete. And we thus need to address what's happening internally in the brain and the body. Let's see whether we can find nuanced ways to learn and grow from our current stress with the help of our natural joy circuits in the brain. To borrow from Buddhist philosophy, stress is a given. But what isn't indelible is the ongoing suffering that we create from stress with our attitude towards it. And each of us has our own unique way of handling stress depending on our conditioned response to it. Overwhelm and hyper-arousal in our neural circuitry shortchanges our conscious desire to stay calm. So some individuals are led to consumption as a means to dampen the aroused sympathetic nervous system, and others tune in and out of life, frozen in their responses between sudden outbursts. So we have a thinking brain and an emotional brain, right? And when we find ourselves reacting, we are in emotional mode. And when we appropriately respond, we have the thinking neocortex to thank for coming up with viable options. At the heart of our emotional reactions are reptilian and mammalian coding. Now, if you are wired for being sad, each time something goes awry, that is your go-to emotion, because that is the neural pathway most walked upon by you, has well-worn grooves, and creates your safety net. Similarly, if anger is your most visited emotion, it means your brain considers this reaction as most favorable to protect you from being crushed by outside forces. After thousands of angry reactions and outbursts, your brain no longer needs to think whether to react with anger post an event. It can very well predict the appearance of a trigger and prepare your body beforehand to get into flight or fight mode. Now you are well and truly programmed to react faithfully with anger. In fact, you even start introducing yourself as an angry person. You can no longer separate yourself from the emotion. And that's a hard place to be in, and one that causes alarm bells to ring constantly. First feebly and then loudly in the form of illnesses in the body. This is the part where you start to worry, when the stress response becomes louder and more pronounced than the stimuli. So, if it's all about wires in our brain, which ones are responsible for feelings of joy and happiness for our own self and others? When do we feel happiness, and when do we know that inner opening to be joy? So, why have I chosen to talk about joy today? I was wondering, why does it take a pandemic to teach us about our true self, our joy abiding nature? We are generally happy with flooding our life with everything our society deems worthwhile, but we still continually search for that one more last elusive thing to own, that which will fill us with eternal satisfaction or contentment. There is no such thing. After everything we possess, people and things, we still feel a void, don't we? Here in the heart area. And that's because at a soul level, we actually are looking for joy, not happiness. That's why I'm thinking we are sated but don't feel joy when we eat a deep fried burger, because it causes the ego, not the soul, to be happy. When the pandemic first broke out last year, we were in total shock and engaged our neocortex faculties in analyzing the how and the why, because it's natural to want to find the cause of distress outside us so we get a modicum of control over the new circumstances. That was sooner than later followed by months of agonizing over correct methods of protection. We had to get it just right. Each time we found success, felt a little safer, we sent information via the positive feedback loop to the brain that we were on the right path and we must continue. But when stress endures, our thinking brain becomes ineffective and we start to rely on the reactions of the reptilian and mammalian units of our brain, which is basically saying we give ourselves over to overwhelm, and in this state, the we-ness of life changes to me-ness. So, one of the reliable ways to move back to cooperation, lovingness, empathy, is to invoke the joy circuits in our brain that function via the negative feedback loop. So, if something gives us joy and is taken away from us, the brain's left prefrontal cortex notices the mismatch between what we like and what we are missing and releases neurotransmitters on the pleasure and reward pathways. So, we make effort, tremendous effort via our behavior to come back into homeostatic balance where we get what we want and we want joy back into our lives. Humans have to make conscious effort to notice and amplify moments of joy because we are hardwired to effortlessly pick out what's wrong in our lives, courtesy our right prefrontal cortex. And were we to leave things as nature commanded, we would actually always have uninterrupted lasting moments of joy. But no. One of the ways to combat our inherent negative bias is to rewire our brain, to train our brain to think and act opposingly to its default mechanism. So we have in the past on this platform talked of resilience. And if we hadn't been proficient before, the pandemic has taught us its importance. Overcoming stress requires a healthy dose of resilience. Healthy self-esteem that comes from secure attachment to our primary caregivers also develops resilience in us in childhood itself, and in adult life we can then consciously find antidotes to all our stressors. However, if we don't possess these tools to overcome stress, then the likelihood of walking the default pathways stays high. So let's consider joy to be the ideal counterforce to all the negative emotions that arise from negative wiring. If we hone our joy circuits, we are going to respond to life joyfully. We're going to be flush with neurotransmitters and hormones that increase pleasure over pain. And over time, with repeated exposure to positive experiences, our brain will have to treat joy as a default switch. Which tool can we use right away to begin this process of finding joy? So tell me, what is your relationship to something higher than you? Be it a spiritual philosophy, an enlightened guru, forces of life, your spirit, nature, or coming closer home, your selfless devotion to freeing all humans from suffering. Remember, it's not in the big numbers alone. A single act of kindness at the smallest level, in the tiniest proportion, flips the vibration of the universe. And if you are in touch with the above, you are liable to experience joy more than others who dwell mostly in the material realm. While they perhaps experience happiness from their acquisitions and relationships, you, on the other hand, have an internal measure of joy. Now, there are many ways to know and understand and appreciate our relationship to joy, quite influenced by the presence of external sources in our life. True joy, however, is an internal affair, and when we can consciously become aware of its comforting presence inside us, we also gain the ability to diffuse stress related encounters, showing gratitude, having a heart full of loving kindness, forgiving others easily, are keen mindfulness expressions of a joyful nature. And even if you pick one of these mindfulness tools and use it unceasingly for 40 days, your brain will structurally change with newer pathways and neurons firing away in new avatar. Is it possible that an abiding expression of joy can become our everyday reality, even with all the unavoidable stress that we go through? Quite ironically, this pandemic has paved the way for us to discover joy-seeking sides of us we may not have fully expressed before, especially that part of the brain which serves others, puts the we before the me. In a state of conscious service to others, what we choose to do versus helping accidentally, we are creating a joyful life for ourselves. It doesn't mean that altruism didn't exist before the pandemic. Of course it did. It always has, being an aspect of pro-social behavior. The difference is, adversity of this proportion has brought out the best and the worst, love of others and fear for self in us. Neurobiology suggests that compassionate behavior, kindness, altruistic tendencies activates the pleasure and reward centers of the brain. A sense of joy comes from having made a difference in the life of another human being. The environment around us in the last year and a half has been toxic, to say the least. Of course, we are responsible for what we have done to it. Yet, in that same environment wherein we had to forgo our social relationships, in many instances with extended families as well, many people chose to stay very close to the heart center, displaying their heartfelt grief for the less fortunate. How? Donations in the form of money, clothes, groceries, medical equipment, and other essentials followed their decisions to save people from doom. And whether from private organizations or individuals, thanks to its spread via social media, altruistic behavior has changed the world for the better. And most humans have risen to their best possible expressions of social responsibility. There's been so much of fear-mongering leading to so much of distress from false notions and manipulated information. Such negative emotions only tend to activate the negative bias we already possess. Yet, hearing the losses from other people's lives have made us better humans, capable of helping to reduce their suffering. There's no better way to create joy in our own lives than to see the lives of others flourish. And this goes way beyond seeking something in return to maintain equality. This giving is effortless, riding on the thought that if someone, anyone, anywhere in the world suffers, so do we. We may not be energetically sensitive enough yet to sense these soul connections, but we do know, intellectually at least, thanks to metaphysics, that we all partake of only one single consciousness. The point is, do we even need to know any of the signs to be kind, affectionate, compassionate, empathic, and therefore joyful? I don't believe so. For this, we could take inspiration from nature, green forests and parks, chirping birds, eloquent sunsets and rousing sunrises, a brilliant star-studded sky. Nature generates awe, and in this state of awe, we can only be joyful. These definitely are wholesome and welcoming interludes on the outside, from the outside, in days filled with terror, as it were. Yet, we could use a natural resource if we have taken effort to create and cultivate one. That of sensing joy in a place inside us at all times. So the best tool I can offer you right away, which I have practiced with for over 2 decades, is your body. With the help of your breath, teach your body to relax. Every time you encounter stress, deliberately invite a relaxation response in your body. And ways to do this via meditation or mindfulness. And a relaxed posture teaches your brain to feel safe and release dopamine. And your joy circuits are then induced. Your positive response to the whole world comes from joyfulness. Even simply bringing in an image of compassion into your mind, somebody else doing a compassionate act, not you, even that can induce a release of pleasure hormones. So get your brain to experience more and more of this, and in time, your brain will reward you with a new default system. According to neuroscientist Rick Hanson, every time you take in the good, you build a little bit of neural structure. Other equally well versed neuroscientists consider joy to be the emotion that gives us the best chance there is at living a life worth lived in equanimity and good health. All it takes is a bit of effort in the beginning to see and do good, and then it becomes the most natural thing to do. Well, thank you for listening. Hope you can take some of the seriousness out of your living and stop taking yourselves so seriously. Being joyful can help you with that. Be seeing you tomorrow morning once again. Stay COVID safe until then.
Help Talks are daily health related talks held at Health Education Library for People, Mumbai, India. For more information visit www.healthlibrary.com. Subscribe to Help Talks channel. Be better informed about your health.